Hello and welcome to As the CMMC Churns. I'm Matt Titcomb, the CEO of Peak InfoSec, an authorized CMMC third-party assessor organization. I am also a CMMC practitioner and assessor and a CMMC curriculum developer. Today's episode is to Enclave or not Enclave? That is the question. So enclaving really starts again. Everything goes back to the CMMC, the NIST 800-171 scope of applicability, that in the very definition for going out of scope, you are moving things to a separate CUI security domain. That separate security domain is that which is up top, your internal stuff, your system boundary. It's all the people, the processes, facilities, and technologies that make up your internal components. Now, that security domain is, well, let's go figure out what that is. So let's go pull definitions in doing that. Security domain is straight out of 800-171. It implements a security policy and is administered by a single authority. You need to understand that single authority. That is a critical component where we see a lot of organizations fail on the security domain. If you've got two authorities managing the same components, you can't have a security domain for that. You've got two then, and you need to separate out because now you've got multiple enclaves, or you need to merge your management processes into one management process that's overseen by one authority. Now, the enclave is actually kind of a spin-off definition of the security domain, and we see that it is the set of system resources that operate in the same security domain that share a common continuous security perimeter. Okay, let's talk this single common continuous part. That is an old way of thinking. That's actually kind of a classic, if you will, castle. You got your security wall, and if I've got a breach in my castle wall, yeah, my castle's going to fall. The continuous perimeter in today's world of perimeterless security really is more logical. And if all the security controls that I've put in around Office 365, my firewall, my endpoints, everything else, I'm treating them as a common, single, managed, perimeterless security boundary. Again, that's the way it is today. Now, the other part in this that I really want to emphasize here before we go on to the rest of this is the fact that that set of system resources, nowhere in here is a definition of just technical. System is always kind of a systems engineering. You've got people, you've got processes, you've got facilities, you've got technologies. It's that conglomeration that makes up your system. Do not think IT. And that's kind of a systems engineering word from, way back in the 80s, but it's kind of the paradigm that's really going on here. Now, the other thing to recognize when we see a security domain equals one and only one SSP. Remember that. And again, that one and only one SSP is administered by a single authority. It's kind of the way this catch works. Now, as we walk through this, again, we're trying to warn you guys to stay away from the technical. You're going to kind of hear this a lot today. Core point in here is protecting CUI is an information-centric paradigm. We've seen these 5 kids before, and you're going to see them many times from me. You got your salesperson on the left who just won your contract, and your COOs trying to figure out, oh crap, now what do I have to do? And your frontline guys are just ready to go do work and have fun. Now, your poor CFO, they've got to manage it through this entire process. And then fundamentally, typically underneath them is your contracts person. They manage it at the end of the life cycle. And they're one of the last people to touch CUI in your business. This is your process. This is your system. Walk away with that and get that. That's your system. Not a computer. Not a server, not Office 365, that. Because the core issue here is when you are dealing with enclaving, it's all about the processes. We talked about this in the scope of applicability and applying that to your business to try and figure out your scopes. You first have to define your processes, and you have to know the processes you've got from the moment of bidding to the time you dispose of that CUI. If you don't know that, you're not going to get this done. Now, this is the most critical step that you have to understand in order to do enclaving properly. Those processes have to be defined. And after that, everything else that follows now enables you to successfully do enclaving, because now you know all the business interdependencies that are really going on. Now, part of this really is the conversation around the real enclaving question you need to be asking is, given our processes again, can we separate our processes out to work on 2 tiers of systems and still operate effectively? What do you mean? Can I have a CUI system over here and can I have a non-CUI system? Can I separate the business out? Can I break parts off and isolate them off? And can those isolated parts still function? This is really a very heavily process driven, especially at the small layer, because everything crosses over. Frankly, the smaller you are, the more likely we find everybody's involved in everything, because you're a small business. You're wearing multiple hats. I get it. I wear multiple hats too. And that's a part of the challenge. Now, all of a sudden, you just can't have that engineer in the middle saying, I've just got my system, that's all we need, and we're good. Doesn't work that way. Everybody in the process still needs access. Now, unfortunately, the more you've got people involved in that process, we talked about the 5 people, maybe 3 people in your business handle all those roles, the more than likely all of their supporting systems and everything they use are also involved. It's just kind of the way it unfortunately goes. Again, we follow the muddy kids. Wherever the mud goes, CUI, that's what defines your scope. Now, inherent in this is a major warning. Walk away from this. This is the second thing you need to make sure you walk away with. Your system are those 5 kids. Do not start your enclaving at the technical layer first. I've seen this too often. We walk in a lot of clients. They're trying to find ways to do this. Again, we're kind of in the CMMC 7 stages of grief, and they're bargaining. And but we've got this one computer. I can do this on this one laptop. Really? Okay, how did that information get to that laptop? Well, I got emailed into contracting. Oh, that email came in with CUI? Well, yeah. Okay, now when it goes out, what reports, who reviews it? And you start asking those questions, you start exploring processes the engineer hasn't thought of because they're only focused on that middle part. Suddenly you realize your process has now covered the entire business, and it just doesn't work to enclave down to a single person. And a single computer. It's very hard to do, and typically we really only see that done when it comes to classified devices, and then they're locked and they're kept up, and then you've got Defense Counterintelligence Security Agency coming to visit you, and you just really don't want to go near that space. But bottom line, do not enclave by starting at the technical layer. It will fail. I don't know how much I can tell you guys this. It will fail. Start the process, work your way down. Then you can enclave appropriately and understand your business impacts more effectively. Starting at the technical layer is typically thinking this is an IT issue. And if you start at the IT issue, you will fail again. Just kind of unfortunate landmines we've experienced after dealing with dozens and dozens of businesses out there we've helped. Now, when it comes to enclaving, this is the spectrum that we've seen. Small businesses, typically, especially on the manufacturing, engineering side, where you're figuring physical components out, most times we tend to find it's an all-in-one enclave. It's really hard to isolate out all of that local stuff, everybody's processes, everything else that's going on, into a separate enclave for your normal business. So typically we're recommending an all-in-one enclave, and it's the only effective way to do it when it comes down to it. In the middle, you got medium-sized businesses. They've got enough space, they've got enough capability, and they're better budgeted to handle some of the friction that tends to come when you're a small business and you can't do this without breaking lots of processes, we tend to see them create an enclave for this. Especially if they've got a lot of other commercial work. They're trying to keep commercial costs down while meeting compliance requirements. This is where we tend to see medium-sized businesses tend to move a little bit more into having a CUI enclave. When you get to medium-sized businesses that are growing and enterprises, this is now where we enter the world of multiple enclaves. This is fundamentally the architecture that DoD uses when it comes down to it. So let's talk about multiple enclaves briefly. Multiple enclaves typically always have one common thing based on their approach, and we can see both of these approaches actually occur at the same time. You always have kind of an enterprise services enclave. This is where all the core stuff, everything the business does, email, Office 365, everything is unique. That tends to be done in there. Now, we see two approaches, and sometimes they get merged together depending upon what's going on. You've got basically a line of business approach, which is what you see on the left, where all the different lines of business all operate from different SSPs. Again, they kind of inherit, and now the business is able to structure things and take business level things out of scope. We then see on the right the mergers and acquisition approach. And this is where we see these two come together actually, is you've got the original business, and that may overlap into the enclave, and those two could be the same color. In many cases they are. But now you start acquiring businesses. Well, as you acquire that business, first thing you do is you start pulling them into your enterprise services. They start getting your email, get tied to your Active Directory. Your IT starts to manage their business. And, so again, but they're unique and different. And you want to keep their uniquenesses and differences so they become their own SSP. And then they start to create their own out-of-scope area for how they manage it. We do see these two come together. You've got a very mature business that's still acquiring, and they'll bring that acquiring in, and they'll start merging those businesses into the lines of business and standardizing the way they operate. ERPs are notorious in this space of being extremely problematic, but again, that's all process driven. But this is where we see an enterprise multiple enclave model get played out. So let's sum up. You need to use enclaving to reduce your scope. Enclaving is always process driven. If it's going to break your processes, don't do it. It's going to end up costing you more in money in soft costs because it's going to labor, friction, getting things done is going to get harder than what it's worth. The other thing is people are going to start going around. And if the processes are not easy and repeatable and they become hard, people start finding workarounds. And those workarounds mean moving CUI in ways that you shouldn't be moving CUI. Don't start doing this at the technical layer. Starting the technical layer is a fail every time, and think through this choice. Thinking through this choice is an impact to your business processes, the way you operate, and the costs of the way you operate. This is not an IT issue. This is an executive level decision for how you're going to handle this and manage your environment based on the way you operate. Now, coming up next week, we'll be talking about applying NIST 800-171 to specialized assets. For manufacturers, everybody out there that's got specialized engineering components that you need to meet compliance requirements for and eventually get CMMC certified, this one is for you. So again, I'm Matt Titcomb with Peak InfoSec. Thanks for joining us today for As the CMMC Churns.